Thank you. And so see you in a few minutes as soon as we start. Thank you. Welcome to the Catalyst of Change, Advancing Equity and Inclusion in Science. This seminar is in English with interpretation available in Spanish, French, and Hindi. You may select the language of your preference at the Zoom bar menu. This seminar will be recorded and made available on the CIMMYT YouTube channel. We will be hearing today from an outstanding leader in digital geography, Stephen Ramage, founder and CEO of Rousseau, with over 3 decades of expertise in location data, tools, and services, as well as business strategy, policy development, research, and innovation. Right after his presentation, Stephen will have a conversation with Madhulika Singh, agriculture specialist and physiologist at CIMMYT based in India. We invite you to submit your questions and comments on the Slido tool to be addressed in the Q&A session right after the conversation. Now, I would like to welcome Dr. Brian Goberts, Director General of CIMMYT, to officially open the event and introduce our distinguished speaker of today, Stephen Ramage. Dr. Goberts, over to you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. And welcome once again to a Catalyst of Change. The Catalyst of Change series that today has a new tagline, Advancing Equity and Inclusion in Science. We started this Catalyst of Change seminar series with the purpose to showcase leaders who are advancing equity and inclusion in their organizations and communities. In this series, we highlight a diverse range of leaders, change makers, and allies of women, underrepresented geographies and ethnicities, differently abled people, indigenous communities, and other often unheard voices in agricultural science and development. Equity and inclusion in leadership are essential for building effective, ethical, and future-ready organizations. By highlighting diverse leaders, we put equity and inclusion at the center of leadership. We aim to provide role models and improve our own institutional leadership because you can't be what you can't see. Inclusive leaders bring people together with different experiences and worldviews and make them part of the decision-making, and innovative solutions and great abilities come from combined capabilities around the table. We therefore invite CEOs, ambassadors, and world-renowned scientists to speak at our Catalysts of Change. The new taglines is thanks to you, because you, our thoughtful audience, requested us to change the format. We heard you, and thank you for that. Our Catalyst of Change of today is Stephen Ramage, founder and CEO of Réseau, leverages over 3 decades of expertise in location data, tools, and services, as well as business strategy, policy development, and research and innovation. Ramage has been working in the location sector and with digital geography since the mid-90s. He has led teams, organizations, and communities throughout his career with a focus on equity. And I hope I'm expressing that surname correctly or pronouncing that surname correctly. If I don't, please correct me yourself. And that already shows how diversity becomes sometimes difficult with different languages. More recently, in 2019, he helped set up the Kibera Community Kitchen in Nairobi, supporting Slum Dwellers International, and this development led to the mentoring of over 270 young geospatial practitioners, which led to Réseau Associates. As Chief Engagement Officer, Ramage works also as part of the team that led the Group on Earth Observation Geo-Indigenous Summit in 2020. This consulting firm is advising intergovernmental organizations, international and commercial entities, and he has advised Catalyst, GIZ, HODN, NASA, and many others, including the World Bank. He's currently a CEO of the Committee on Earth Observation Satellites. This is the world's space agencies working together with partners in civil space-based Earth observation, and is on the board of GEOBON, the Global Biodiversity Observation Network, and also on the board of Climate Policy Radar. He's a fellow of the Royal Geographical Society. Stephen will have a conversation with Madhulika Singh, agricultural specialist based in India. Singh currently works in her home state of Bihar for the Cereal Systems Initiative for South Asia, led by CIMMYT. She's engaged with over 10,000 farmers from the states of Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, supporting the adoption of conservation agriculture practices. Singh and her colleagues have led the transition from traditional farming to sustainable intensification practices, early wheat sowing, zero tillage, and direct seeded rice, which have helped smallholder farmers increase seed potential substantially. With this, and without further ado, I am happy to present and kick off this catalyst of change. Over to you, Stephen.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, Ramage is how I say it, but it's a French name, so a lot of people say Ramage. So it's whatever's easiest. So I'm Scottish, but long time ago my family was French and they fled from France and ended up in Scotland, so hence the name. So thank you for the kind introduction. I don't really have that much to say. I think there's a lot of stuff has been shared already. That was a really nice introduction. I've been working since the early 1990s. And I realize some of the people on this call might not have been born at that time. So I've seen quite a transition in my career around a sort of balanced approach to leadership. Unfortunately, I've seen a lot more equity and inclusion in the last decade or so, and long may it continue. So I think that there's going to be a chance for questions, and everyone can read my bio or look on LinkedIn or whatever. So I'll just stop there.
So thanks, Stevens. Hello, everyone. I'm Madhulika Singh. Ram has given a very elaborate introduction for myself. Currently, I'm based in Bihar, and though trained as a crop physiologist, my 12 years journey with CIMMYT has allowed me to expand my expertise into agronomy, extension, and recently, my profile has also been into training and capacity building. I'm involved in training scientists, faculty, students, and extension agents for generating big data sets, that is also known as the landscape diagnostic surveys. This is through the real-time data. We are doing the real-time data collection in it, and we are ensuring, to find out the gaps which is existing to the system. I'm doing this training work with ICAR, which is the federal body, the government body in India, and we are training the state agriculture university people as well as the extension agent across ICR. It is a pleasure and honor to welcome Dr. Stephen Ramage today. As agriculture steadily transitions into the digital era, I see like the role of geospatial system has become immense. So I'm really looking forward to have an engaging conversation with him on how his expertise in geospatial data supports agriculture and informs policy development. To begin with, Dr. Stevens, I would like to ask, what motivated you to contribute towards mentoring geospatial practitioners, and what advice would you give to the mid-career or senior scholars in developing such mentorship programs?
I've been mentoring people for most of my career, and I started during COVID. It was much easier to meet people online because everybody was, they were working from home. And so I started speaking with one or two people, and I had previously been in Nairobi with Nisera Wanjiru, who had taken me round her community in Kibra in Nairobi, which is an informal settlement. And from that sort of experience, I realized there was a lot more that I had to learn about, where people came from, what challenges they were undertaking, and how to address them, and the type of support they needed, which is not always obvious if you're a white man who's in their 50s. You have a very different lived experience. So that helped me to start to speak to other young professionals who were mainly women practitioners who were working in geospatial, including Earth observation. And so I found with most of the younger women that I was speaking with, there were a number of common threads. It was not being taken seriously, or they would write a paper or a report or something, and other people would put their name on it and take credit. It was about not just generally not having a voice or being unheard. And it was about having opportunity. And I think many people take opportunity for granted. So I'm in a position where I've been in a senior leadership role probably for 20 years in the sector. And so I was able to make introductions, I was able to give guidance, and I was able to just sort of share some views on where I thought careers could go, or and I speak to people who come straight out of university, and I also speak to people who have been working for 25 years. So I ended up doing something like 270 of these calls. And as a result of the calls and the common threads and everything, I thought it would be good if I could find a way, a platform to help amplify those voices. So through my company, Razel Consulting, I spoke to some of the women that I had these conversations with, and I said, would you be interested if I found a way to help promote you as an individual and give you a platform for you to write a blog post and then to share that, across my platform, which is about 50 or 60,000 people. And everybody said yes. And so that's how we started the Razo Associates. So I've put that link in the chat for people to see. So that's the first part. And I'm sorry, that was a very long answer, but I wanted to give the background of where it came from. I was very fortunate in my career. I had a lot of people who helped me, and probably 90% of my bosses were women. So I got to see how they had to face glass ceilings. I got to see how they were treated in meetings and everything else. So I was fortunate from that perspective. In terms of the second part of your question, I think is becoming harder now because of things like misinformation or disinformation, where people are pushing back against the science, or they're just making up things that are not scientifically proven or correct. And so it's very important to stick by your principles and to stick by the data and to stick by facts, and not to get drawn into discussions where, quite often people are trying to lead you because they want to put forward a position that is quite hard to counteract, and often is not based on fact. So I think science is very important, but being able to explain the science, science communication for me is as important as the science itself.
Thank you so much, Stevens. My next question is actually like related to the first part of your answer that you've given, but still I would like to ask you so that you can elaborate a little bit more on this. You have been in the geospatial community for many years. Do you see any changes in participation of the female scientists? So, how do you think that institutions like CIMMYT can increase the number of geospatial data scientists and more integration of this part with the research part, along with the
So
research part?
it has changed absolutely, and definitely in the last 5 years. So there are individual pockets of excellence. So you have like ladies of Landsat being the US satellites. You have Sisters of SAR for synthetic aperture radar. You have Women in Copernicus for the European Space Agency and the European Commission or European Union program. And then you have like an umbrella organization. You have Women in Geospatial, and they tip the point of more than 5,000 women. And for me, that is sensational. That, and sorry, I should say it's women plus in geospatial. So it's not just women, it's any underrepresented community or person. So I think that has, I've seen like communities develop like the humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, HOT, where they've been doing open street mapping, and I've been a hot voting member, and I've helped them
Mm-hmm.
develop the strategy, the organizational strategy, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And they're
Mm-hmm.
also a very, very inclusive community. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think it is. What I see though, and where the challenge is, and it's kind of ironic that Bram's a man and I'm a man. I think there are very few men in leadership roles in these communities that are coming in. So what someone at Sisters of SAR told me I was an ally, and I didn't know what an ally was. I had to learn what that was. And so I think there's a big job of education and outreach and awareness for men in the sector, so they understand, the challenges that exist are much more than what is perceived.
Thanks, Stevens. My next question to you is like, with the rise of AI and big data, what innovations in geospatial analytics do you foresee having the biggest impact on the future food system transformation?
I mean, we've always had in remote sensing and Earth observation, we've always had machine learning, we've used AI, deep learning, we've done that stuff. I mean, maybe now you have the change with things like large language models and foundation models and other elements that are coming through. I think that the technology will always develop, and I've watched it over 3 decades. In the agriculture arena, so if you look at what's happened in the big intergovernmental arena, we had essential climate variables, which were looking at how we monitor the climate. We've had essential biodiversity variables, and now we have essential agricultural variables. So we have there are things like land use and productivity, essential agricultural variables. There are agronomic management, essential agricultural variables. So these are things like being able to look at the seasonal dynamics of surface water availability, evapotranspiration, non-perennial cover crop masks.
Mhm.
I mean, many other things that I'm not an expert in, but I've been when I worked at the group on Earth observations, we had something called GeoGLAM, Global Agricultural Monitoring, and GeoGLAM. Now that I'm at CEOS, the Committee on Earth Observation Science, uh, uh, Committee on Earth Observation Satellites, we also work with GeoGLAM. So CEOS is much more about the science and the technology, and Geo is much more about applications and policy. But with those two working together, there's already consideration to progress in technology. So what you were mentioning about artificial intelligence, about, there are changes in methods, there are changes in data, in sensors, in algorithms. You now have open algorithms, you have open science, you have many different elements working together. You have frameworks like FAIR and CARE and TRUST.
Yes.
And I think it's all of those things coming together. But one thing I've been talking about a lot for the last decade, and I've given some keynote talks on this quite recently, is the human interoperability. So we talk a lot about technical interoperability, and we talk about data and silos, and we've sort of been at this area of siloed data platforms, looking at short-term fixes for different things like ecosystems, data misuse, data mistrust, or even exclusion. And so we talk a lot about like technical interoperability, semantic and syntactic interoperability. But I think we need to talk more about human-centered interoperability. So people as the platform where we become more inclusive and equitable as we talk about interoperability. And so that's why I put together this concept of human interoperability, where we talk about trust, relationships, shared language, co-governance, sort of human and institutional alignment, and being able to think about how to integrate community voices with knowledge systems. And that's where some of the work we did previously on working with Indigenous communities was really important, because they were never, when I was at GEO, there was never really a consideration of those external voices. It was always just, well, we use this framework, so these people are included. And that's unfortunately not how the world works. You have to actively go out and engage people and let them know that they have a voice and bring their voice into your process. So that was a very, very long answer to your question, but this concept of human interoperability is something I feel quite strongly about.
Thank you so much. And with CIMMYT, I would just like to add on, like, we have also like tried keeping, the data on the dataverse, which is like making it more usable and, interoperable for people in an open system. Yeah, open data system, what we call it. So thank you so much for your answer. I would also like to ask, like, when we talk about farmer field, or when we like, talk about farmer field, I would get into like some Indian context, because I'm based over here. So we have at times, a lot of unevenness, when we talk about, the management, when we talk about the climate, when we talk about the ecology. So I mean, what are the challenges of integrating, remote sensing data with ground truthing in agriculture, like surveys? I mean, can you throw some light on this? Because we have faced certain, like, situations. If your expertise can help us, with this.
I mean, I think it's I mean, you have a huge number like Africa and parts of Latin America,
Yeah.
where you have these smallholder farmers. And I think, again, if I look at the view, a lot of the technology and a lot of the solutions come from outside India or outside Africa or outside South America or Latin America or Asia and the Pacific. And I think that lack of understanding is quite problematic, because people think it's all about throwing technology at the solution. And I was very fortunate to work with an Indian company for the last year called Satsure. And Satsure is now a couple of hundred people. They are working with another Indian company called Kaleido. And so they've been putting, they've been working on satellites and they've been working on sensors. But I think equally as important is they've been working with credit unions. So they've been able to figure out a model where the farmer can think about the financial viability of using that data as part of a process where their livelihood and their life is included in the decision making. It's not just a technology decision, but it's something based on other data, like, how do you pay back the cost of that data? How, if you have a poor season, where is the insurance for your farm, no matter what size it is. And so I've also been working as an advisor to an insurance company called Howden, who are in London. And they just published a paper that I'll share afterwards. You can share with the audience. But they've published a paper with the European Union on exactly this topic and thinking about things like, parametric insurance, where an event triggers the insurance. So I think the remote sensing and earth observation for agriculture is just one part of the overall picture. And that's what the part of the problem is, that having that whole picture takes quite a lot of time and energy. And the Food Systems Summit that the United Nations ran, there was a guy from the World Economic Forum called Sean DeClean, who ran that with the Director General of FAO. And I think getting people like that to sort of talk about what they've experienced at a macro level and then how that can be applied at a micro level, I think we need to do more of that kind of stuff as well, where people have the vision, and it's not about selling technology. It's about actually being more representative on the ground. So ground truthing, yes, is very, very important. And quite often, depending on the resolution of the satellite you're using, then there might be a difference. But there's much more to it than just that technical element, in my opinion.
Thank you. Thank you so much. What are the biggest barriers, I would say, when you can see, you see, while scaling a geospatial solutions for the food systems globally, and how we might overcome them?
I think it comes back to the human interoperability. I mean, we have a lot of the data, and it comes down to policy and decision making. So when COVID hit, I was invited by, actually, I don't know who I was invited by. It might have been the Prime Minister of Kenya. They put together a task force on, they had a number of different challenges. So they had locusts, they had, they just had like big floods, then they had drought, then they had COVID. I mean, everything hit at the one time, and they put together what they called a war chest, a treasury, working on that. And all of that was about leveraging funding from the donors. So they had the Swedish Development Agency, we had the Norwegians, we had the Germans, but we had a lot of local agricultural organizations as well, and international ones, sitting around the table and trying to figure out what could we do quickest with the biggest impact to help people who literally had no food. And yes, technology was part of it. Obviously, science underpins the decision making as well. But that whole process was about people. It was about the policy that could release the funds, the policy that could enable people to do the activities, the policy for just letting the decisions take place. And behind all of that policy making, and even behind the science and technology, is people. And so for me, that's why I mentioned people as the platform. I just think we've got to think, if you're asking for data, someone is releasing that data, and you have to understand their motivation or their incentive to release it or not release it. Sometimes it's because they don't think it's perfect. Sometimes it's because it might differ from what another government department has. These are all different things that we need to consider. So for me, that's why I like to frame it as human interoperability, because we need to understand all these different elements when we're going through the process of the long-term implications versus the tactical decisions and the long-term strategy and vision.
Thank
I
you
hope
so
it
much.
won't sound too much like a management consultant. I'm trying to explain it in a way
Yeah,
that
yeah, totally.
these are big considerations that quite often people just gloss over. They'll say, oh, we have an open data policy. That's not enough. You need to go beyond that and practically look at how you implement and enforce these different things like open science, open data, open algorithms.
Yeah, that's true. Uh, I would also like to, understand exactly what role does location data play in climate smart agriculture or regenerative practices when we talk about it?
I think I used to talk about location as the third currency. So you have time, you have money, and you have location. So if you can figure out location, you can infer so much. The power of location is, I mean, it's now a multi-billion-dollar industry. And I think there are lots of discussions about, is location going to go mainstream? I mean, it kind of went mainstream in 2005 with Google Maps, right? It just happened. And suddenly people realized that we could use maps for everything. And so I think someone will, I mean, we've had so many different things around the golden era of Earth observation. And for me, it's all just location. It's all just XY coming from different sensors or different, methods of data capture. The important thing is like that location on its own is not that useful. You need to have socioeconomic data. You need to know, like, if you've got a location for a water point, who lives around that water point? What's the distance people go to reach that water point? How many water points are there within a specific area? So geography can help, but it needs to have other data to support it. And so that's where things like the essential agricultural variables, having information on soil, on groundwater, on atmospheric conditions, that's where that with location becomes very useful and very insightful.
Thank you so much. It is also a additional answer what I had asked earlier. Also, this question: how does this help basically the unevenness that we find in the fields? The ecology or climate and soil, etc. Thank you so much, Stevens. Uh, to add on, I would like to ask, how can geospatial data support more equitable food system when you talk about food system, food security, particularly in marginalized or climate vulnerable regions?
I have seen there's a company called Visuality, and they've been working on an open source supply chain model, which is called Land Griffin. And I've seen more of that where people they're working with these big entities, who are using cocoa or who are using soya or who are using palm oil. And I've seen some of the big Coca-Cola, Mars, Unilever, Nestle. I've been advising companies who've been advising them and selling technology to them, like Visuality. They were one of my clients. Picterra was one of my clients. Space Intelligence was one of my clients over the last couple of years. And I think they are realizing that they need to be more on the ground in those countries where the produce or where those are being sourced and working, because I think there's greater transparency. So it could impact their bottom line, their margins, their profitability, if they don't start to be more equitable in the treatment of the people who are working there and the approach and the process they're taking. So I've seen more of that happening. And I think what I'd like to see even more of is as these like open supply chain models are being developed, we're not flying in consultants from Europe or America, but we're working with local expertise. And I do think that's starting with some communities. There are companies like We Robotics who've been involved with drones as another way of capturing, data, remotely sensed data, and they only hire people who are local, and they own the local chapter, and they build it up. So I'd like to see a lot more of that coming from the geospatial community as well.
Thank you so much for your insights on this,
But they're
Stephen.
all using geospatial data tools and services anyway. The last 3 years, I've been to so many different events around biodiversity finance, around forestry and agricultural investment. And almost everybody now, you go to one of these meetings and you say, who's heard of remote sensing? And hundreds of hands go up. So it really is starting to get into those areas.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we are also witnessing the same. So I was like, very excited to talk to you on these stuff matter. Uh, my next question is like, while AI and geospatial technologies have immense potential in transforming agriculture, there can be, unintended outcomes too. So, could you share an example where the integration of AI or location data tools didn't deliver as expected, and some lessons which the beginners or the mid career people can learn from you?
I think it goes back to the sort of the data quality element. So, rubbish in, rubbish out. And so some of the training data hallucinating or not having good quality, and then decisions being made on that data. But the
Mm-hmm.
corollary of that is that, we have vast areas of land, especially in countries like Australia or Africa, even like South America and India, where it's not feasible to use surveyors or people to go out all the time. So using the Earth observations, once we get the correct data going in for the training models, and we understand how to really use artificial intelligence. I mean, there are different levels of using AI, right? There's elements like downstream where the European Space Agency, for example, has been doing projects and where they've had artificial intelligence on board the satellite and working with the sensor. And so if there's a lot of cloud data being collected, then it's not sent back down through the data pipe. The AI goes through and reviews, the level of cloud data down to the data processing pipeline, where you can start to do these very large, efficient operations because you have very clever technology through artificial deep learning or machine learning or natural language processing, unstructured text, all of these different things that you can approach. But I'm not the right person to talk to about that. I mean, I went to Stanford and I did a course on on digital transformation, and I realized that, once they started giving me exercises on random forest algorithms and all these things, I realized that I was like 20 years out of date with my own, I worked in programming in the 80s. So I understand the basics, but there are so many brilliant people out there. And in fact, there are brilliant women who are working in AI. And I saw the UN did a podcast or a meeting last week, and it was only men talking about AI and geospatial. And I publicly posted, I said, this is not good. I mean, in the network that I support, even in Women Plus and Geospatial, there's probably 500 women doing artificial intelligence and Earth observation or geospatial that they could have picked from, and instead they have like 7 men. Anyway, sorry, I'm digressing.
Thank you so much. How do you see these WhatsApp chatbots and IVR system work in other parts of the world? Like, I mean, we are doing things in India also on these systems. How does it work? Like, how type of data and quality of data that is being uh, received from the. We will definitely talk about farmers only because it's an agriculture system, or any other examples also if you have like from.
I think there's, I mean, it's definitely gives you an insight into the cultural differences. Like I know when I was in China, everybody had WeChat, and I had to download WeChat and I had to use it as part of like
Mhm,
projects and discussions. And then you
mhm,
mentioned WhatsApp, and then a whole load of people are using Telegram and others. And so I think in like if you look at what Africa's done with things like M-Pesa, um, and mobile banking, then you can start to connect some of the activities around selling local produce and time to market by using
mhm,
those as platforms. Um, if we look at things like citizen science, then again, if people are running like, ODK or something like that,
yeah,
and they
yeah.
want to quickly share results to a larger community, there are things like that in terms of like probably more near real time where that information exchange is helped. I'm not sure, and I don't think I'm qualified enough to comment on how it helps with things like volunteer geographic information and looking at the. I mean, I think everything from my perspective, I'm kind of old school. I like everything to go through a data quality control flow
Mhm,
line.
mhm,
So I want to make sure that if we have quality standards, those are met by all types of data coming in. And if it's in a workflow, I want that to be part of an ISO process. ISO like, I don't know, 19113, 114, 157. I worked for the OGC for a few years, so I ended up learning some of these standards numbers. But I think it's really important that it does go through a quality control process. And in the Earth
mhm,
observation arena, that would be calibration and validation. So I'm not sure that we're at the level yet where you can send the rigor, the quality control in those platforms is good enough for production level data sets, but it's maybe
mhm.
enough for different parts of the supply chain just to inform people more quickly than they could previously.
Okay, thank you so much. We have been also utilizing the ODK platform for collecting the real-time data for LCAS or the LDS I was talking, the surveys that we have been doing in India. Yeah, thank you so much. I think that's all from my side. It was really, I mean, very engrossing, and there are many questions that is coming, like, in my mind. So I'm not aware if we are crossing the time limit,
Ah,
Isabel.
yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. We have some questions from Slido.
Sure.
Thank you very much, Madhulika, for having this very exciting conversation with Stephen. So I'm going to start, and also we would like to invite the audience to participate in the open Q&A session. So please be ready to raise your hand, open your micro and your camera. Also, you are invited to submit questions via Slido for our distinguished speaker of today. So I'm going to start with the first question that we have received by Slido. So Stephen, how do you view gender and social inclusion in the context of agriculture science research and development in general? What strategies should be developed for strengthening this important field for food security in the global south?
I think it's about a lot of it's about understanding and education. So it's about, I don't really like the word, but it's about stakeholders. So looking really broadly at who the stakeholders are, and I think historically we've fallen into the trap of trying to please the funders, or maybe someone who is paying for a report or who's paying for the data. And I don't think there's been so much equity or inclusion for the people who are actually doing the work. And so I think if taking a much broader approach to looking at almost like the supply chain, and at every part of the supply chain, is everyone treated equitably? But at a certain point, you have to also define, what does that mean? Is that in terms of contribution? Is that in terms of participation? Is that in terms of financial reward? Is that in terms of recognition? Quite often people are not recognized for the work they do. And so I think even just doing that, just actually recognizing people for their contribution can be a very significant effort.
Yeah, thank you very much. What kind of supports what kind of support do you cultivate for yourself and for your students to keep your spirits high, that optimism? Do you have networks you tap into, or hobbies you pursue, or other sources of inspiration?
I do. I do. So I facilitate a network of, it's about 60 women who are in South America, Africa, Asia, the Middle East, and Asia and the Pacific. So they're basically outside of Europe and North America. And I learn a lot from that community. Those are the Rezo associates. Um, and they're, I mean, because the geography, the culture, the languages, I'm always learning about different things from what people are doing through that, and that's very inspirational for me. And I'm always bringing new women into the community. So I mean, like, probably in the last week there were 3 new women joined. There'll be another 3 new women next week, and that is really great for me to see. On the other side, I'm part of a gym, a training center, and I go every day because it gives me discipline and it helps me to think. So when I'm like trying to push these stupid weights up above my head, or I'm trying to do something that is, I'm almost 55, and I train with these guys who are like 25, and they're all, oh, they're all trying to show their muscles and everything. That also inspires me because it's good to see their enthusiasm, and we have a lot of women and also less able-bodied people who come to the gym. So it's a very inclusive gym. So those two things really give me a lot of energy and enthusiasm. And I still do a lot of mentoring. I still speak to, I don't know, 10, 15 people a month, sometimes more, sometimes less. But I'm always speaking to people, and just sharing my experience and my knowledge. I don't have all the answers, but I can obviously give input from what, working since 1992 is quite a long time, and I've seen quite a lot of things.
Yeah, I think your experience is quite important for the young people. And now we have already, there is an evolution in the field of research and the technology. So it's very important, I think, your experience. So, what regarding this mentorship and advices, what advice would you give to other professionals who share your perspectives and on and interest in advancing female and young leadership?
I think for everyone, I would say be patient. People are always really keen to see results or to advance their career or earn more money or whatever it is. And it will come. If you want it, it will come. But you need to be patient. I think I see in a lot in the younger generation, and my son's 21, and it might just be his generation, I don't know, but I see it in others. Because quite often people want to talk to me when they're doing a career change, or they're considering a career change, or they're going for a promotion. You know, it's something that's impacting their day-to-day life. And that's when I'm always saying to them, just be patient, you know, things will come if you put in the effort and you're working hard. On the representation, the diversity, the gender element, I think that's a bit different. I think you do have to work harder, but I think maybe what's happened, and I hope this is not just my perception, but I think there are maybe more allies now. So yes, you can align yourself with women in power, but I'd like to see more men in power step up and become allies. And that's something that I've started to talk about more. And even I struggle, you know, I get men who say to me, why are you doing that? Like, you know, women have equal pay. And I'm like, oh man, it's a lot more than that. And actually they probably don't have equal pay. So I think it's a big education process, and it's challenging for everyone.
Yeah, very interesting. So now, what is the advice that you have for organizations like CIMMYT who are working to promote diverse leadership? What advice would you give to help grow and support women and young leaders within the organization?
I think it's like you talk in the title about advancing equity and inclusion in science. I mean that's to me is what it is. It's like make sure that you've defined equity. Like, you know, what does equity mean, and make sure that everybody understands the same definition. I think, you know, when people are getting promoted, are the salaries, are the terms and conditions the same? You know, what does it mean if someone takes maternity leave? That shouldn't impact their possibility for future promotion. These are the kind of considerations I think need to be taken into account. But I find with most of these things, it's about communication. You know, the more you communicate, if you over communicate and you don't leave it to assumption, or you don't say, well, it's in the manual or it's in the guidelines, you have to really over communicate this stuff.
Yeah, thank you so much. And now go back to your area of expertise. There are some questions here. It says, are advances in AI and large language models going to make your spatial monitoring easier and more accessible? And how bioinformatics will be used in agriculture?
The answer is I don't know. I mean, yes, technology develops, and if there are, I mean, like the example I gave about, you know, like you can apply artificial intelligence at different parts of the workflow, and Earth observations obviously help because you're capturing data across large areas, across borders, as rivers flow. You know, there are very many benefits of using Earth observation in that way. I find that right now there's quite a lot of academic discussion around things like encodings and foundation models, and I'm not sure. I know there's a lot of research in this area, and that's why I'm hesitating a bit, because every day I see something different, and I'm presented with different approaches, and then someone will say, well, that doesn't scale, or maybe we should use that in an edge computing environment, or quantum computing is going to step in. And quite honestly, it's really, really hard to keep up. So I tend to look at organizations like yours and FAO, and others to see where actual implementation has happened. That for me is much more important than just the academic element. I like to see implementation and results from that. And right now, I'm not sure how much has really happened beyond experimentation and research. And I'm happy to be proven wrong or sent papers that say, you know, we did this and it's scalable and it can go into, you know, a production or an implementation environment.
Thank you, Stephen. So I would like to give the floor to Madhulika just for any reflection that you would like to share with us for this conversation, having this interesting conversation with Stephen. Madhulika?
Yeah, actually, my gradual shift, Stephen, I mean, in his mail, he wrote like he accidentally shifted into, getting to this system. And I accidentally got into the data science, from physiology to data science now. So it's like very interesting to get the real time data when we talk about the ODK system, getting instantly what exactly the some technician or somebody has done from the field directly to us, and getting it like assessing, analyzing, and finding even if there is some discrepancy coming up from the field, you can automatically get solutions regarding that. And his insights about totally across like globally that he has worked definitely enriches my whatever I have imbibed from this particular system. So it will add to it, and I will definitely like to be in touch with you, Stephen, and maybe I will contact you regarding further getting more insights from you, dealing with AI and GIS and stuff like that. So thank you so much.
I've put my LinkedIn in the chat. And actually, the AI ML paper that CEOS is working on is being led by Israel in India.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So thank you. So Stephen, for in order to conclude with our seminar of today, what words of wisdom could you share with the audience as our takeaway?
Oh, crikey. Words of wisdom. Treat others as you would like to be treated yourself.
Very wise, very wise. Thank you very much. So, on behalf of Dr. Bran Govers, Director General of CIMMYT, we thank Stephen Ramage so much for sharing with us your outstanding professional and personal journey. Thank you for being a catalyst of change. Thank you so much. And also, we thank the audience that joined today, and we invite you to the following Catalyst of Change, Advancing Equity and Inclusion in Science seminar in 2 weeks. Thank you very much and have a very nice day. Thank you.
Thank you.